and welcome to an especially filthy edition of Ben's Junk. And of course, I'm referring to the camcorder. So let me just start at the beginning here. A very generous viewer back in early September donated this PXL 2000 to the archive, and he found it at a yard sale and didn't have a chance to test it or anything, didn't have any of the accessories or anything, but he sent it to me. And it was, of course, wonderful. I've been wanting one of these things forever. But I wasn't joking in the episode that fixing this thing was a nightmare. It took me about 2 weeks and about $30 in parts to get this thing up and running again. So let's take a more intimate look at the PXL 2000. I didn't do this in the main episode, largely because I just wanted to keep the time under control, and I wanted to confine things more to how it looks and how it is aesthetically speaking. But now we can take a slightly more technical look at it, as technical as Fisher-Price gets. So, which is probably about my level of what my puny little brain can handle anyway. So, here is the camera. Obviously, it has some damage. It has dings and dents and scratches all over. And I had to take this apart and put it back together a bunch of times because, as I said, I didn't get any accessories with it, so the only way I could test it was to put batteries. There's 2 compartments. There's 1. There's 2. Grand total of 6 AA batteries in here. And the only way you can put the batteries in to test is if this thing is completely assembled. So, it was a real process. And there's just so much junk in here. It doesn't look like you're going to fit much in there, but there's a lot of crap in here. And if anything, I think Fisher-Price cheaped out a bit with the size of this. I'd rather have seen this be another ½ inch or so, and maybe have some sort of rubber bumpers or something in the housing. Just something so you can have a place for all the wires and crap, because otherwise you're tucking wires under everything and everything's jammed together and everything comes out, unfortunately, and it's a real pain. So the eyepiece would fall out, the glass in the viewfinder would come out, and indeed there's a bit around here. You can see it's out. This was glued down initially by the manufacturer, and that meant that I had to basically rip it off, and I never did bother to glue it back down because if I have to take this apart again at some point, I don't want to have to deal with it. And indeed, there are actually little rubber stoppers that were glued in here where the screws are, and I saved them. I have no great use for them, but it's just one less thing to worry about. And this thing is such a hog in terms of maintenance and everything. It's not a very reliable toy, and its lack of success just surprised me less and less with each passing day. So let's take a look at the lack of functions here. You put a tape in, and this doesn't spring up all the way. It has not done it since it's been in my possession at all. But to put a tape in, you actually have to kind of finagle it in there with your thumbs. So, like that. And then you have to pop it down with your thumb one last time till it clicks. And you got to switch here, record mode, not record mode. And then just the most basic of buttons. There is no fast forward. There's play, record, which takes play with it, and then eject. So there's very little to that. And if you look down the viewfinder here, this is going to be a tough one to do. But if you look, it's just a piece of glass in there, or plastic, really. And you see down the nose of the camera. This is a very tough angle. I apologize. Going down to here, and then you've got this little tiny blue speck in here, just to the north of the this piece of foil, and that is this infrared filter for the lens. And it's a really teeny lens housing and everything. and that filter is super small. And that was another problem. I had to actually take this entire lens housing apart. This here is its own entity, but I had to take the whole lens thing apart. I actually had to break parts of it open and then glue and screw it back together as best as I could. A lot of this is glued together because that's how it came. It wasn't by my choice anyway. I'd rather have it been screwed for easier access. But I had to take out the filter because something inside, a capacitor or something, let out, and the lens was just caked in this corrosion-like stuff. So the lens is just tiny. It's about, if you've ever been to a restaurant where you use a sugar packet and it's the big crystals of sugar, that's about how big that filter is. So I had to take it out with tweezers and then clean it out in a tiny little Tupperware. And then I had to rebuild it with tweezers, and that took me too long. So anyway, let's take a quick look at this. This is not a focus or anything. This is lighting. So it's in low light position now. So everything is just going straight into that little blue filter. And the other setting is low. It just covers it with a piece of foil. Not really elegant, in my opinion. And also, this must have been living under something because, or in some sort of really bad conditions. I joked it was buried in someone's backyard because it was all caked in mud and everything. It really was. But this got warped somewhere down the line. So when I turn it, if you look down around here, you can see the whole thing shift. That is not because it's not together properly. It's because this is not actually round anymore. Part of it got flattened somewhere down the line between the late 80s and 2015. So, and then in the episode, you probably noticed a lot of the stuff I filmed on this onto tape was just a wee bit off-center in the final image. And that's because it is not accurate. Even though everything lines up just right in the viewfinder and straight down into the filter and all, it is just not accurate. And I've never been able to quite work that out. And the best I could do was, by the end of the episode, I was shooting things intentionally to the left, so things would be sort of center, but that's just because something is up, or maybe it's just because it's such a small lens in there. And as I mentioned, they jammed too much in here, and so everything had to land just perfectly when you put it back together. So putting this together and taking it apart, which I did too many times, was just an absolute nightmare. So there's the camera, and I had to replace a few things. So most notably, I had to replace the belts, which hardened. They are just stiff. This is the main belt, and that's the secondary one. They don't really do anything. And then, of course, a big part of why it wasn't working was because they weren't elastic enough to make the gears go around. So there you go. I had to replace a lot of the padding in here. There's pads all over this thing because, for one, there's two circuit boards in here making kind of a sandwich of sorts, and the lens, the entire lens thing, is being held on with a long piece of ribbon cable, but it's just resting on the circuit board. It's not tightened to anything, so it's just loose. And so it was propped up with foam initially in the factory, and all the foam in here just rotted completely. I had to basically just rub it all off with my thumbs and then take a knife, and in some areas a razor, and just clean it out. So I did that, and when I replaced the pads, I'll show you one of them, since it's not too hard to come by. There's pads in here in the battery compartment housing, which this was supposed to live in there too, but it was just too much of a pain in the butt to reinstall every time, so it's just free. But I have these all over the place inside where they were initially by the manufacturer, and to try and save a little money, I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of sponge brushes and I ripped off the sponge and I cut them down to size, and that's what's in here. And let's see, I really did go through all those tapes in the episode. So here's the 4 main tapes that I used. You have one of each bias, one normal, one high, and then 2 of these are long tapes. The 2 Memorexes are longer tapes, and then the 2, one's a Fuji and one's a TDK. These are both 60 minuters. So yeah, I wasn't trying to con anyone there. And I did come across a couple of parts for this. They're really not all that useful, but I guess I'd kind of like to rebuild something resembling the complete package that this was at some point. So far I've found the RF adapter. It's missing the phono cable, unfortunately. And I actually found a copy of the manual, which is nice to have, but it was already online. But I picked it up anyway, again, trying to just rebuild this thing. And so, yeah, I think I've said everything pertinent about this probably twice or 3 times. And that's it. I just want to thank the viewer that sent this thing to me one more time, even though it was a total pain in the ass. And yeah, this was not an easy episode to make, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I've got this in my possession now. It's a cool little piece of history, and I'm out of here. I'll see you again soon.